Yeah, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know it's pretty late at night over there for you and you're moving soon. So thank you for taking the time for a quick chat. Um, yes. Oh, before we begin, is it okay if I record the conversation so I can look at it later?
Yes, sure.
Perfect. Thank you. Um, okay. All right. Is it okay if I start asking questions or did you have any questions for me first?
I don't have any specific question. I have a runny nose. I just let you know I need to sneeze my nose.
No worries. I feel like everyone is getting sick now, but that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. We can start kind of general. I guess one question that I've been kind of wanting to hear people talk about is why do you think it's important for history to be recorded and to continue to talk about past events?
Why is it important? I cannot justify its importance, but I think it's spontaneous. People talk about their own history, and
Hmm.
because their parents, their ancestors also talk about their history. So there is a social legacy in this history telling. Uh, so I guess it's spontaneous, but whether or not it is important, I don't know. I think it's just inevitable.
Okay, that makes sense. So for my project, like specifically, I'm trying to examine the effects of the Second Sino-Japanese War on both like China and Japan. And obviously that's a very like large part of both countries' history. So kind of going
Yeah.
along with that first question, um, why is it inevitable that such a large event would continue to play a role on modern day life?
Uh, it starts as uh, a learning process, a learning from the intruders who had the strength to open to your communities and export their values to your community and extract resources from your community. So the surprise uh, intrusion uh, sort of prompt people want to recover, want to retrieve their pride or their their natural life, their natural social life. So they start learning from the intruder. Uh, some of them decided that uh, we can't beat them. We should join them. We should be part of that superior world instead of continue being us. And Japan, for one, has hosted many thinkers along that line. Not just Japan, almost all colonized societies have leaders, elites, intellectuals trying to become uh, colonizers, become part of the colonizing society, so that they would feel uh, they no longer feel inferior. But that doesn't work. You'll always feel inferior because you're adopting a criteria, and then you silence your own culture, your own knowledge. You're no longer able to talk about your own history because your language, your discourse come from the intruder, from the colonizers. And Japan, I think, had that kind of uh, predicament before World War II. So they decided they wanted to be part of the colonizers' world, but the colonizers' world didn't accept Japan. So the Japan turned around and say, well, since we could not be part of the colonized world, the only way to recover our own uh, pride was to organize ourselves. And then Japan looked around. In the past, they thought China and Korea were so inferior. So Japan didn't want to be part of East Asia until Japan was denied. at least they felt they were denied by the colonizers' world. So they decided they should empower the entire East Asia, including primarily Vietnam, uh, uh, Korea, and China, and Taiwan. So there was one choice, was to be part of the West. That failed, and to get together your own people, so you could kick the West out of Asia. And the way that Japan did it was quite brutal. It wasn't appreciated by not all Chinese or Koreans. Some of the Chinese Korean joined the Japanese. They joined force to try to strengthen East Asia. Uh, but some of them feel Japan was out of mind. Japan was too brutal, was not respectful, and actually turned against its own promise. So they decide to resist Japan's help from Japanese point of view. Uh, so, but there were always debates in all communities, what to do, what's the options, and there's always political correctness, the problem of political correctness, like we are facing here today in the United States. The same politics of political correctness uh, took place before World War II. So you have all kinds of a sense of inferiority, sense of injustice, sense of being victimized in this part of history. So that's the problem. That's why people could not forget about history, because they came from a past which they think didn't do them justice. So they want to recover. They want to
Mhm.
regain their whatever they think they are entitled to. And this, of course, collide, right? Because they had different position in the beginning.
Mhm.
So they had problem with the solution each other came up with themselves afterwards. So
Yeah. So, do you think the like superiority and inferiority complexes like still affect the countries today and how they interact?
I
Like,
think they are continuous to haunt the
mhm,
countries once they become independent countries. They were independent countries. They didn't know what independent countries mean, and
mhm,
they try to be independent country. They repeat the same path that their ancestors did. That is trying to be a sovereign, independent state as defined by
mhm,
previous colonizers. So they still try to be the same uh, uh, actor, uh, which had the respect and recognition from the colonizers' world. So
mhm,
they still
okay.
do. Uh, so that continue to haunt us. So even though young people like you don't talk about that, but it's not difficult to stir your sense of inferiority somehow uh, in in your some kind of subconscious drive that your parents, the way they talk, your teachers, the way they talk, the way they act, that carried the emotional legacy, which has no discourse to express, because
Mhm,
discourse are already, you know, uh, silence. You had no discourse. We had no discourse.
for sure. So I think kind of going off of that, like one thing I noticed in my research was that, like specifically for the Sino-Japanese War, China and Japan have slightly different ways of educating their children about the events. So, in your opinion, do you think that the different ways the children are being taught about the events is going to affect them in the future and affect the future of geopolitics?
I thought we had a chance when the digital age started, when I see people cut across boundaries created for them, and then they organize all kinds of small groups, tracing their own interest. So
Mhm.
you have, oops, you have all kinds of small groups. I thought it was good, but then after a while, I think all the rulers, colonizers, government elites learn to use this digital platform to discipline their own citizens. And they rely on the same old historical cleavages uh, already uh, inexpressible in their own society to trigger political correctness or the sense of being inferior. And they divide society. They do this through this new digital platform. I think basically destroy the trust people already established when they organize themselves across borders. So I truly thought the digital platform was a wonderful thing. But then it seems that they can be better used by the rulers, by the controllers. So I'm no longer that optimistic.
Okay. So would you say, in your opinion, then that there's still like unresolved conflict that exists?
Yes, right. And this conflict sometimes don't show the way that they were uh, built in the beginning. It's
Mm-hmm.
no longer like two power fighting for territory. It's no longer like that. It's more
Mm-hmm.
like two groups trying to compete with each other and see who is more uh, who resemble former colonizers more, who can
Okay.
be praised and liked by the former colonizers more. It's something like that. It's unfortunate.
Okay. Do you think that, like, in your years of research, have you seen potential solutions to that, or do you think it's something that kind of we just have to accept and can't be resolved?
Um, I usually avoid thinking about solutions. I don't think I'm wise enough to come up with solutions that don't further destroy the world. But my way is talk to people like you, talk to younger generation, how I feel about this, why we feel sometimes we feel the way we feel, why why this happened, why our seniors continues to be trapped in the same old story, couldn't come out.
Mhm.
And this, I think, has to a lot to do with emotion. And you
Yeah.
cannot control your emotion if it's driven by some subconscious drive, which was left to you by your ancestor, by by the trauma that your parents suffered. And they simply uh, probably they didn't teach you specifically what happened, but the way they talk, the way they feel, that
Mhm.
that can translate emotionally to us, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of moving to a slightly different topic, I saw in your publications that you contributed to studies of China and Chineseness since the Cultural Revolution, specifically the
Uh,
section on reinterpreting ideologies and ideological reinterpretations. I wasn't
uh,
able to read it, unfortunately, so I was hoping if you could like explain a little bit more about what you wrote there.
that wasn't a successful project in the sense that the uh, authors of different chapters
Mhm.
don't come together around a clear central theme.
Oh,
But
okay.
the project was already launched. Authors already contributed their writings. So we still
Oh,
put them together. Uh,
interesting.
my original idea is to look at how the cultural revolutions affected the way people think about China, or
Mhm.
or did not affect, or may have affected in the immediate aftermath of the Cultural Revolution, but for 10 years or 2 decades afterwards, they return to their original track? I was thinking about those questions. Um, but there are not many people talk about this. Most people talk about how some people talk about how Cultural Revolution has been studied. That's not what I've been trying to achieve. Some other people uh, talk about China's development after the Cultural Revolution.
Hmm.
That's not also uh, I want to do. I want to study how knowledge about China being produced after the Cultural Revolution. But most people understand the topic as how China has developed after the Cultural Revolution, rather than how China has been studied everywhere in the world. Uh, so chapters don't come together, uh,
Hmm.
but I managed to put them somehow into two volumes. So the second volume is about how people look at China from a decentralized point of view, like how minority are being
Hmm.
studied, how women being studied, something like that. The first volume, ideological interpretation or reinterpreting ideology, is uh, there's no central theme, but it's around. It's about something about Chinese ideology.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
my chapter is about how the end of the Cultural Revolution has had created a myth in the Western think tanks about China turning liberal, and they
Oh.
try to help China, and they try to engage China, and then China gradually developed and grew, but not along the line they thought it would become. So they become, some kind of a deprived, psychologically deprived because the expected development didn't occur. That's my chapter.
Okay, that's interesting. Um, I don't know. This kind of connects back to what you were saying earlier too about this superiority ideas being influenced by like Western civilizations. Do you believe that like because of that idea that Asian countries in general will end up developing like the West, or do you think they're going to develop more in a unique way? That's kind of unrelated,
Um,
but
I think consciously people want to develop along the modernization track that,
Mhm.
that what West has uh, come maybe from 300 years ago, from reformation, from scientific revolution, from capitalist development. Uh, Maybe that was what the most people in the colonized world want to achieve.
Mhm.
But uh, they, they didn't come from the same path. They didn't have the sense of original sin, for example. They
Okay.
didn't have the sense of being suppressed by a Catholic church, the city of God. They weren't suppressed by that. So there was
Mhm.
no strong resistance to collective way of life. There
Okay.
was no colonialism committed by the other parts of the world. So there was no sense of guilt that all the state, all the self who committed original sin, who come from the original sin, must be restrained.
Mhm.
And we see the development in Europe and in the capitalist industrial society. There was a sense of civilizational progression that we have jettisoned our brutal past. We no longer engage in colonial wars. We no longer expanded. We no longer fight imperial wars. We no longer suppress our people. So we feel we become more civilized. And they look around the world. Other people don't do the same thing. So they become anxious. They think all those other people come from the colonized world were just like who they were before. you
Okay.
know. But these people never commit Holocaust, never committed colonization. They didn't feel guilt. So they
Mhm.
didn't feel the necessity of self-restraint. uh, orders by rules. They still try to interact as if that we are all uh, human beings.
Mhm.
And there are problems, there are bad people, that we resolve that through our traditional moral way. We don't solve that through whatever you call the rule of law or election. Even though electoral politics or electoral democracy is spread all over the world, but we can see not only the former colonized world failed to develop the same liberal society after uh, repetition of elections, but
Mhm.
also the liberal world has decayed into what they were before World War II. You see
Okay.
all kind of fascist politics in liberal world today. So not only the colonized world does not develop along the liberal path, even the liberal world has been reduced, has been, you know, uh, kind of slowed down or suffered evolution.
Okay.
Uh, so that's not the way out.
No, that's really interesting. I feel like I've never really heard of the like the development of our liberal world now. Could you like explain a little bit more about how we're turning to like fascism, as you put it, or like why it isn't going the way we thought it would? I'm just trying to under.
Fascism is, I think the postmodern fascism is about using political correctness in a
Mhm.
massive scale, trying to divide the world, to take advantage of social cleavages in order to achieve their own goals. Uh, who knows what their goals are? They thought they had a goal. They thought they could profit from this, but then eventually they disappear. I mean, uh, and it's fascism because the ruling elite will will come from the same group of people. We
Mhm.
thought we could cast a vote to overthrow a bad government and elect a new one, but you never know. Well, whoever lost the election, they wouldn't lose their lives, they wouldn't lose their property. They were still there after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. They come back. If they
Mhm.
don't come back, their spouse come back, their children come back, their brother, sister come back. It's still the same group of people. But
Mhm.
we, as people, as voters, we think we punish them. And we are responsible for the result of the governments because we choose our own government. But we didn't really choose. They come from the same group. It's the same group of people, taking turns.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's that's some kind of, I call this postmodern fascism. It's a group of people rely on social cleavage. Imagine how many immigrants, colored people now in the States working for these elites at all
Mhm.
levels, from nurses during the pandemic, right? All these nurses of color skin went to the United States to help.
Mhm.
And high tech, the AI engineers, they're all colored people. However, then you have leaders who who tells uh, his or her potential supporters, basically lower and middle class white people, and all those colored people rob you of your jobs. But
Mhm.
but these people turning who turned into racism, all those lower middle class white people turned into racists. They're not real racists. They're victims. They're but because they're being mobilized by the leaders to believe in the robbing of their jobs by minority, by not minority now, by colored people, by color skin, uh, and all those immigrants have to work harder in order to be protected by these leaders. So the
Oh,
leaders play two roles. One leader played the role of mobilizing the lower class white people to hate immigrants. The other person played the role of saving immigrants. And they fight each other. And we choose between them. I think this is fascism. I mean,
oh,
racism is there, capitalist controls there, and political correctness is there. It's very bad. I mean, it's just they just stop. They just didn't kill each other physically. I think
mhm.
they're not better.
Okay. That's a really good perspective, I
I'm
feel.
I'm a little bitter. I'm too old for you, perhaps, to say this.
No, this is good. I'm like learning a lot, I think. I guess I know you said earlier that you would rather like study and not necessarily like pose solutions, but like if this was a hypothetical or like fictionalized world where you could kind of shape the future of it, what changes would you like to see?
Again, I don't know. But if you really force me to come up with a solution, I would say give as much money as possible to the suppressors so they no longer fear losing something. We just buy them out, just bail them out of their position. Or if you see some dictators suppressing their peoples, I think it's really stupid to intervene, try to change the system there because the
Mhm.
way you try to change it, intervene, you ruin every possible solution that could come up spontaneously in the indigenous society. Uh, uh, Everything is in cycles. Nothing can be bad all the time. Nothing can be good all the time. Since we'll
Mhm.
take turns, we will try to figure out a way to save ourselves. If we don't save the society, we try to save ourselves. If we're doing this a mess, there will be a result, right? The system will be different. So I would expect people to escape or estrange from the regime so that they don't have enough support to sustain their system. And they lose legitimacy that way. It's a
Mhm.
long way to go. But if you take 100 years perspective, well, some generations has to be sacrificed. Some generation benefits, some generation sacrifice. Uh, that's my pessimistic view, but also some people would tell me that I'm very optimistic. I think system will be different in 100 years.
Uh,
So I think that I told them that my way, if I had enough resources, I would just uh, bribe the dictators away from their positions so they don't feel action. And I
Interesting.
will bribe the victims so they can survive their bad lives.
Mhm. For sure. Okay, I know we're a little short on time, so I just have a couple more questions. Um, I guess like in like the global world, I guess, all things considered, do you think it's important for people from other countries to continue learning the history and political affairs of countries they aren't related to? Like, for example, do you think people in the United States should try to make an effort to learn more about Asian politics and vice versa, or no?
I think they cannot, it's impossible for people to learn everything about other people. But
Hmm.
encountering learning is very important because encountering and learning can eventually lead to unlearning.
Hmm.
Learning is about how to make sense of other people, other things according to my original thought.
Hmm.
And learning is trying to understand myself from other people's perspective. So even though I cannot 100% empathize with other people's perspective, at least I can appreciate that I am not uh, natural as I thought I was, so I can be the model for everyone else. So a learning becomes very important. I call this epistemological tourism. So
Okay.
we try to go to other people's shoes, into their shoes, and look from their eyes, and we'll never succeed to do that 100%. But at least we try to move away from our own perspectives, so we can unlearn ourselves. Once we can unlearn, we will
Mhm.
feel less anxious about us being invaded, being, you know, be encroached, be so we'll feel less anxiety about that. It's
Mhm.
kind of therapy, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess kind of my last question, less about the topic, I guess more like personal, is why did you decide to go into political science and specifically like history?
I thought I was going to be a diplomat after
Mhm.
I read Italian and German modern history, and I thought uh, diplomacy was really important in strengthening a community and making them a country. But
Mhm.
that was like when I was your age, when I was in high school. Once I entered international relations, I
Mhm.
immediately somehow just obsessed with scholarship, Western scholarship especially. I thought it was powerful, was attractive because there's scientific pursuit. And then I came to the state and I feel alienated. I thought it was not the way they study my culture was not how I understood my culture. So
Mhm.
I start critically reflect upon my own culture and the Western sciences. So that gradually I became who I am. So strictly speaking, most my colleagues and my classmates in the past wouldn't consider me as a political scientist because I'm not a typical political scientist. I'm thinking things that's not typical in political science. But then I now run into a lot of people from the global south, a lot of scholars. They're not great in number in terms of the world population, but they're getting uh, we're getting more and more critical people from the global south as a scholars and intellectuals. I thought that was okay for the time being. That just keep me going, I think.
Mhm. Thank
These are
you.
comrades.
For sure. Yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective. I'm also thinking of going into international relations maybe in a few years. So it's good to
Okay,
see how it's made a difference. But yeah. Yeah, like I was saying, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you have,
no problem.
you said you were going to Taiwan, was it? Or,
No, I am going to Lithuania tomorrow.
oh, Lithuania. Oh my gosh, that's so far. That should be very fun. Um, but yeah, thank you again for your time.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah.
Could you possibly send me the link, if you since you record this,
Oh
so
yeah, for sure.
I can see, I can hear what I have talked. Sometimes I forgot what I talked.
Of course. Yeah, I'll send it to you probably in a few hours from now.
Oh, okay, great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so
And good
much.
luck with your learning. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.